Imagine holding a small piece of metal in your hand. It feels cool, solid, and honestly, surprisingly heavy for its size. But you know, this is no ordinary coin. It is a 1 rupee piece from British India, minted in the year 1945. This single year, well, it really encapsulates a story of immense transformation, a tale of empires clashing and a nation on the very brink of freedom. It is a silent witness to history, a relic from a world that was rapidly vanishing. For an American reader who might be more accustomed to the familiar faces of Lincoln and Washington, this coin actually offers a gateway into a different past. It speaks of a time when the British Crown ruled over a vast subcontinent, and its story is deeply intertwined with the final, dramatic chapters of that rule. The story of this particular rupee, though, begins not in 1945, but much earlier, with the establishment of the East India Company's dominance. The company, which was a corporate entity with its own army, eventually gave way to direct British rule after the Great Uprising of 1857. To standardize currency across their vast Indian territories, the British established grand mints in cities like Calcutta, Bombay, and Lahore. These were industrial powerhouses, churning out millions of coins to facilitate trade and taxation, the very lifeblood of the empire. The rupee, an ancient currency of India, was co-opted and redesigned to serve the new masters. It became a tool of control, a symbol of British economic power, stamped onto the daily lives of hundreds of millions of people across the subcontinent. The year 1945 was, without a doubt, pivotal. The world was just emerging from the colossal wreckage of the Second World War, a conflict that had, frankly, bled the British Empire dry. India had contributed immensely to the war effort, sending over 2 million soldiers to fight for the Allied cause. Yet back home, the winds of change were howling. The demand for independence, for Swaraj, was no longer a polite request, but an unstoppable force. It was in this charged, uncertain atmosphere that the 1945 rupee was minted. Each coin that clattered out of the minting press was, in a sense, a final gasp of a dying empire, a last assertion of a sovereignty that would soon be history. These coins were not just abstract symbols of power. They were the gears of the everyday economy. They were used to buy rice in the marketplace, pay a fare for a rickshaw ride, or receive a day's wages for laboring in the fields or factories. The 1945 coin, therefore, passed through the hands of countless individuals whose lives were being shaped by these monumental historical shifts. It connected the highest echelons of the British Raj with the most humble of Indian subjects. This small metal disc represents a crossroads in time, a tangible link to a moment when the future of a nation, and indeed the world, hung precariously in the balance, making its journey from 1945 to today a truly fascinating one. Let us look closer at the coin itself. On one side, the obverse, you will find the crowned head of a man. This is King George VI, the last emperor of India. His profile is formal, stately, and facing left. He was the king who had, rather reluctantly, led Britain through the Second World War, and the father of the future Queen Elizabeth II. For the people of India, this face was the symbol of a distant foreign power. The inscription, George VI, King Emperor, encircles his portrait, a bold declaration of his dual role as the monarch of Great Britain and the supreme ruler of the Indian Empire. Yet, by 1945, this title of Emperor was becoming increasingly hollow, its authority eroding with each passing day. What makes the 1945 rupee particularly interesting is its composition. Previous rupee coins were made of high-purity silver, giving them a satisfying heft and intrinsic value. However, the immense financial strain of World War II forced a significant change. Silver was a precious strategic material needed for the war effort. Consequently, the British Indian government made the decision to debase the currency. The 1945 1 rupee coin is made not of pure silver, but of a quaternary alloy, containing only 50% silver, mixed with copper, nickel, and zinc. This alteration was a practical necessity but it was also deeply symbolic of the empire's waning wealth and power. Turn the coin over to its reverse side, and you will see a design that is distinctly Indian, yet framed by British authority. In the center, within a circle, are the words 1 rupee and the equivalent value in Persian script Yek rupiya. The year of minting, 1945, is clearly displayed at the bottom. Surrounding this central text is an intricate floral wreath. This design features the rose of England, the thistle of Scotland, and the shamrock of Ireland, interwoven with the Indian lotus flower. It was a carefully constructed piece of imperial propaganda, an attempt to represent a harmonious union between the ruling power and its most prized colony. This blend of symbols tells a complex story. The lotus, a flower deeply revered in Indian culture and religion, is placed alongside the emblems of the United Kingdom. It was meant to suggest a partnership, a blending of cultures under the benevolent gaze of the crown. However, for many Indians fighting for freedom, this imagery represented a forced and unequal relationship. The design, intended to project unity and stability, instead captured the fundamental tension of the colonial experience. It was a British interpretation of India, stamped in metal and forced into the pockets of a people who were yearning to define their own identity and destiny. In the India of 1945, this 1 rupee coin was a significant amount of money. It was not a trivial piece of change one might find and forget. For a vast majority of the population, a single rupee represented a substantial portion of a day's or even several days' earnings. A farm laborer might toil under the hot sun from dawn till dusk for this very coin. It could buy a family's meal for the day, a modest quantity of rice, lentils, vegetables, and perhaps some spices. It was the currency of survival, the tangible reward for hard work, and the means to sustain a family in a country grappling with wartime inflation and shortages. The coin circulated widely, from the bustling port cities of Bombay and Calcutta to the smallest, most remote villages in the Himalayan foothills or the deep south. In the cities, it might be used to purchase a ticket for a tram, buy a newspaper filled with news of the war's end and political negotiations, or pay for a cup of hot chai from a street vendor. The jingle of rupees in a merchant's cash box was the sound of commerce, the rhythm of a society in motion. These coins were handled by people from every walk of life. British officials, Indian clerks, factory workers, soldiers returning from the war, and farmers bringing their produce to market. The physical nature of the 1945 coin, with its reduced silver content, was not just a matter for economists. People noticed the difference. The new quaternary alloy coins felt different and lacked the bright, clear ring of the older, purer silver rupees when dropped. This debasement of the currency was a source of public mistrust and anxiety. Hoarding of the older, higher silver content coins became common as people understood that their intrinsic value was greater. This act of hoarding was a small, personal rebellion against the economic policies of the Raj, a quiet vote of no confidence in the stability of the imperial currency during a time of great upheaval. For a young person in 1945, receiving a whole rupee as a gift would have been a moment of great excitement. It was enough money to buy a cherished treat, perhaps some sweets, a small toy, or even a ticket to one of the popular new Indian films being produced in Bombay. The coin represented possibility and a small measure of economic freedom. It connected the grand, sweeping narratives of war and independence to the intimate, personal stories of daily life, joy and hardship. Each scratch and mark on the surface of these coins tells a story of a transaction, a journey, a life lived in one of the most transformative years in modern history. Immediately following its minting year, the 1945 rupee continued its life as common currency. However, its time in circulation was destined to be short. On August 15, 1947, just 2 years later, India achieved its independence. The British Raj was officially dissolved, and the face of the British monarch on the nation's currency became an anachronism, a relic of a past that was now officially over. the newly independent government of India quickly began the process of designing and minting its own currency, featuring national symbols like the Ashoka lion capital, which replaced the portrait of the king. The era of the King Emperor Rupee had come to a definitive end. As the new Indian coins entered circulation, the old British Indian currency, including the 1945 rupee, was gradually withdrawn. For a time, they were simply considered old money, melted down for their metal content or languishing forgotten in drawers and boxes. Their value was little more than their face value or the fluctuating price of their 50% silver content. They were memories of a previous era, but not yet widely appreciated as historical artifacts. For many Indians, they were symbols of a period of foreign domination that they were glad to leave behind, not something to be cherished or collected. The passage of time, however, changes everything. As decades went by, a new generation of Indians and collectors around the world began to look at these coins with fresh eyes. They were no longer just obsolete currency, but tangible pieces of history. The 1945 rupee, in particular, gained significance because it was one of the very last coins issued under British rule. Its debased metal composition told a story of wartime desperation, and its date placed it squarely at the epicenter of India's struggle for freedom. Coin collectors, known as numismatists, began to seek them out, appreciating their unique historical context. Today, the 1945 British India 1 rupee coin is a popular and accessible collectible. While it is not exceptionally rare, millions were minted, its historical importance gives it a value far beyond the silver it contains. A well-preserved example can be a prized possession for a collector, a small but powerful symbol of the end of an empire and the birth of a nation. For anyone, whether in America or India, holding this coin is like holding a key to the past. It is a humble metal disc that tells a grand story of war, freedom, and the incredible journey of a nation, reminding us that even the most ordinary objects can bear witness to the most extraordinary moments in history.